Marcus Chin stood in the narrow confines of his apartment, the steam iron hissing as he pressed careful lines into the sleeves of his only suit. Through the single window, the vertical farms of New Providence stretched skyward, their hydroponic levels glowing green against the gray morning. His apartment sat on the 42nd floor of a repurposed industrial tower, the kind of building the city had rezoned 15 years ago when the housing crisis peaked. Most units here were compact, efficient, 120 square feet of living space designed with the precision Marcus himself had pioneered, though no one in this building knew that. He flexed his left hand, feeling the familiar ache in the joints. The neural sleeve he wore helped, sending mild electrical pulses to reduce inflammation, but some mornings the arthritis won anyway. At 52, his hands carried the evidence of 3 decades spent not just designing buildings but constructing them, testing every joint and beam himself. The calluses had never faded. The apartment's walls were covered in photographs, physical prints, an anachronism in an age where most people stored memories in cloud drives and displayed them on digital frames that cycled through thousands of images. But Marcus preferred permanence. Helen smiled at him from their wedding day, her hand on his cheek, both of them impossibly young. Emma at 3. Covered in paint from one of their weekend projects. Emma at 8, the year Helen died, trying to smile for the camera but grief already settling into her eyes. Emma at 18, college acceptance letter in hand. Emma at 25, MBA graduation. And dozens more, a chronicle of a life built in modest increments. The door chimed. Marcus checked his neural implant, basic model, no social media integration, just communication and navigation, and saw Emma's biometric signature. "It's open," he called. Emma entered in a swirl of expensive fabric and subtle technology. Her dress, some designer Marcus didn't recognize, shifted color slightly as she moved, responding to ambient light and her body temperature. Thermoreactive fiber, probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her neural implant was latest generation. He could see the faint glow of her iris display as she likely reviewed messages even while smiling at him. "Dad." She crossed to him, kissed his cheek, then noticed his hand. "Your arthritis again? Just stiff?" "I'm fine," she frowned, and he saw her eyes flick left, accessing something on her neural display. "I'm sending you the contact info for Dr. Reeves. She specializes in regenerative therapy. Uncle Richard used her last year, and Emma." He kept his voice gentle but firm. "I don't need their help. Never have." Something crossed her face, not quite hurt, but close. She'd grown up caught between worlds, and Marcus knew she'd never fully understood why he'd kept that distance from her mother's family. To Emma, it looked like stubborn pride. She didn't know the full story, didn't know what Richard and Diane had said when Helen first brought Marcus home. "He's using you. Gold digger with a tool belt. You're throwing away your future." But Helen had chosen him anyway, and Marcus had spent 20 years proving he deserved that choice, even if no one but Helen ever knew it. "The car's waiting," Emma said, changing subjects with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent her life navigating difficult conversations. "It's a 2-hour ride to Uncle Richard's estate." Marcus finished with the suit, hung it carefully. "How are you feeling?" "About tomorrow?" "Terrified." "Excited." "Nauseous." She laughed, but he heard the tremor underneath. "Jake's family arrived yesterday. His mother keeps sending me messages about seating arrangements and menu adjustments." "I think she's nervous." "About what?" Emma met his eyes, and Marcus saw the truth there even before she spoke. "About us. Our side of the family. Dad, the Sullivans are, their tech dynasty. Old money that became new money. And we're what? Different." She looked away, guilt coloring her voice. "They've been polite, but I can tell they're concerned. Jake loves me, I know he does. But his family keeps asking questions. About your work, about how I afforded graduate school, about," she stopped herself, "about whether their son is marrying down." "Don't say it like that." Marcus pulled on his shirt, fastened the buttons with deliberate care. "Emma, if Jake's family judges you based on perceived social status, that tells you everything you need to know about them. And if Jake allows it, that tells you everything about him. He doesn't allow it. He defends me. But her voice lacked conviction. Does he? Emma's jaw tightened, and Marcus saw the little girl who used to argue with him about bedtime, grown into a woman who'd learned to hide her doubts behind professionalism. This weekend is important, Dad. Please. I need you to just try. With Uncle Richard, with Aunt Diane, with everyone. Can you do that? For me, Marcus wanted to tell her the truth then. Wanted to explain that he had nothing to prove to Richard, that the modest apartment and old truck were choices, not necessities. That he'd quietly revolutionized affordable housing while Richard built vanity towers for billionaires. That the MacArthur Fellowship sitting in a drawer somewhere meant more than Richard's entire career. But telling her would defeat the purpose. Emma's accomplishments were hers, her scholarship, her work ethic, her success. If she knew he'd been funding her education through shell accounts. If she knew the scholarships had actually come from his own foundation, it would taint everything she'd earned, so instead he said, I'll try, and hated himself a little for the lie. The car that picked them up was a sleek autonomous vehicle, its interior more luxurious than most apartments. Real leather, not synthetic, Marcus noted, touching the seats. Wasteful. The windows were smart glass, currently transparent but capable of becoming displays, privacy screens, or entertainment surfaces. Emma settled in and immediately began reviewing something on her neural display, her eyes moving in that distinctive pattern of someone reading text only they could see. Marcus watched the city scroll past. New Providence had been one of the first to implement his density housing designs, though few people knew it. The vertical neighborhoods rising along the old industrial corridor, those were his work. 50,000 families housed in what had been abandoned factories and warehouses. Each unit small but precisely designed, with shared community spaces that fostered connection rather than isolation. He'd proven you could build affordable, sustainable housing that didn't warehouse people but actually improved their quality of life. Richard's developments, by contrast, were monuments to excess. Luxury high-rises where apartments cost more than most people earned in 5 years, built with cheap labor and cheaper materials. Designed to impress rather than endure, the city gave way to suburbs, then to the sprawling estates of the truly wealthy. Here, the old money had reclaimed physical space, building compounds that rivaled small towns. Richard's estate appeared on the horizon like something from a previous century, or a future one, Marcus couldn't decide which. Holographic gates, quantum-encrypted security, the whole property surrounded by a shimmer that indicated active defense fields. Excessive. Paranoid. Exactly Richard's style, they passed through 3 security checkpoints, each scanning their biometrics, neural signatures, even their emotional states through microexpression analysis. By the time they reached the main house, Marcus felt thoroughly processed. The mansion rose before them, a grotesque display of wealth. Real stone, marble, probably imported, mixed with smart surfaces that shifted and changed, displaying art or information or nothing at all depending on Richard's mood. The ground stretched for acres, manicured with robotic precision, dotted with sculptures that probably cost more than the annual budget for the housing projects Marcus built. Richard stood at the entrance, silver hair perfect, his neural implants glow visible even in daylight, premium model, integrated so deeply it was part of his identity display. His suit was thermoreactive like Emma's dress, but his also included haptic elements. Probably connected to market feeds and status updates. He existed in multiple realities simultaneously, the physical world and the digital hierarchies he'd spent his life climbing. Marcus. Richard's voice carried that particular tone of someone addressing an obligation rather than a person. You found the place all right? I wasn't sure if your vehicle would make the drive. Marcus's truck sat in the circular drive, ancient and obvious among the sleek autonomous vehicles. He'd kept it running for 15 years through pure maintenance, another thing Richard would see as failure rather than choice. No trouble, Marcus said evenly. Diane materialized beside Richard, her appearance so artificially preserved she looked more like a hologram than a woman. 50 years old and trying desperately to look 30, her skin too smooth, her movements too fluid, enhanced by micro-augmentations that cost more than Marcus wanted to imagine. Emma. She air-kissed Emma's cheeks without actually making contact, probably afraid of smudging whatever cosmetic film she wore. Darling, you look lovely. Your dress is charming. The pause before charming said everything. Marcus she ignored entirely. Inside, the house was worse. Every surface displayed status, adaptive architecture that responded to occupants' moods, climate controls so precise you could set different temperatures for each square foot, holographic displays showing feeds from a dozen cities simultaneously. Richard's wealth wasn't just visible, it was oppressive, designed to make visitors feel small. The rehearsal cocktail party was already underway in what Richard called the East Pavilion. A space large enough to hold 300 people comfortably. Crystal, real crystal, not synthetic, refracted light from chandeliers that probably predated the digital age. Servers circulated with drinks and food grown in Richard's private vertical farms, each item a small fortune. Marcus took a glass of water and stationed himself near one of the ambient displays showing market feeds. He recognized most of the guests, Richard's business partners, developers who'd built empires on exploitation and environmental destruction. These were the people who'd turned housing into an investment commodity, who'd created the crisis Marcus had spent his career trying to solve. Richard held court near the center of the room, his augmented voice carrying easily over the crowd. My niece is marrying into the Sullivan family. Finally, some real ambition in the bloodline. His eyes found Marcus across the room. Though Emma got there despite certain disadvantages, several people glanced at Marcus, their neural displays probably pulling up what little public information existed about him. They'd find nothing. He'd kept his profile deliberately minimal, no social media presence, no professional portfolio, just the basic citizen information required by law. Diane found him next, approaching with a smile that didn't reach her cosmetically perfected eyes. Marcus, we've been meaning to talk to you. Now that Emma's settled, you should really think about your future. She touched his arm with fingers that felt slightly wrong, too warm, too smooth. Richard knows a property management company that needs maintenance staff. Steady work, benefits, health coverage for that arthritis. She looked at him like he was a problem she could solve with the right charitable donation. I appreciate the concern, Marcus said, keeping his voice neutral. I'm fine, of course you are. She turned to the women beside her, not bothering to lower her voice. So proud. Helen spoiled him, really. Made him think he didn't need to try harder. And now look, still in that little apartment, still doing odd jobs, while Emma had to work 3 times as hard just to get to normal. Marcus's hand tightened around his glass. Through the window, he could see Emma on the terrace with Jake, her smile bright but brittle. She was performing, trying to be whatever version of herself would make this weekend work. The formal dinner was worse. 150 guests packed into the main ballroom. Yes, Richard had a ballroom, seated at tables that probably cost more than most cars. Marcus found himself at the family table, positioned between Emma and an empty chair, facing Richard and Diane across an expanse of real linen and gold-plated flatware. Jake's family sat nearby. Dominic Sullivan was in his 60s, distinguished in the way only truly wealthy men managed. His neural implants so premium they were almost invisible. His wife Patricia was younger, warmer, but Marcus could see the calculation in her eyes as she studied him. Their younger son Tyler sat beside them, 24 and radiating that particular smugness of someone who'd never questioned their privilege. Dominic stood to make a toast, his voice amplified by room acoustics that probably cost more than Marcus's entire building. To family legacies, he began. To the futures we build and the dynasties we create. In the Sullivan family, we believe in legacy, in passing down not just wealth, but values, ambition, the drive to leave the world better than we found it. Every word, however unintentionally, highlighted everything Marcus supposedly wasn't. Then Richard stood, and Marcus knew from the glint in his eye that this would be bad. I want to take a moment, Richard said, his smile sharp, to introduce everyone to Emma's father, Marcus Chen. He gestured toward Marcus like presenting evidence. Marcus is, well, he's a handyman. Keeps himself busy with odd jobs around town, repairs, that sort of thing. He paused for the polite, awkward laughter. We've offered many times to help him find something more substantial, but Marcus is fiercely independent. Admirable, really. The word admirable dripped with condescension. Emma clearly got her determination from him. She had to work twice as hard to get where she is today. Overcome obstacles most of us can't imagine. The implication was clear. Marcus was the obstacle. Emma's face had gone white. Jake reached for her hand under the table. Marcus sat perfectly still, but something cold settled in his chest. Not anger, anger was wasted energy. This was something closer to resolve. Diane leaned toward Patricia Sullivan, her voice pitched to Carrie. We tried to help after Helen died. But some people just can't accept help. Pride, you know. His best was barely keeping the lights on. Thank God Emma won those scholarships. She worked 3 jobs through college just to make ends meet. We supplemented when we could, but Marcus wouldn't accept direct help. Didn't want to admit he was struggling. Patricia smiled uncomfortably. I'm sure he did his best, of course he did. Diane's tone said the opposite. Marcus looked at Emma. She was staring at her plate, caught between defending him and keeping the peace. He saw her internal calculation, watched her choose silence, and felt something crack in his chest. Not blame, never blame for Emma. But grief for what she didn't know, for the burden she'd carried thinking she'd pulled herself up from poverty when the truth was so different. Gregory, one of Richard's business partners, approached Marcus with the careful friendliness of someone addressing a charity case. So, handyman work. Ever think about going into contracting? Real money there. Though I guess at your age, starting over's tough. I'm content with my work, Marcus said quietly, content. Gregory laughed, his neural display flickering as he probably recorded this conversation for later entertainment. That's what people say when they've given up, isn't it? Tyler Sullivan joined them, carrying the casual cruelty of youth and privilege. No judgment, man, but how do you even pay for stuff? Emma said you live in a 1-bedroom in the industrial district. That's gotta be what, 60 square feet, 120, Marcus corrected. It's home, yeah, but don't you feel? I mean, embarrassed? At your daughter's wedding? Everyone here is successful, and you're kind of. He gestured vaguely at Marcus. The odd one out, Emma had heard. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. That's enough, but before she could continue, the ballroom doors opened. The room didn't go quiet immediately, conversations continued, glasses clinked, the ambient music played on. But there was a shift, a subtle change in attention, as people registered the new arrival. Sophia Reeves walked in with the kind of presence that didn't demand attention but commanded it anyway. She was 48 but wore it like victory rather than defeat, tall, her dark hair shot through with silver she hadn't bothered to hide or augment away. Wearing a dress that was simultaneously simple and obviously expensive in a way only true quality achieved. No thermoreactive fabric, no haptic displays, just exquisite tailoring and genuine confidence. Her neural implant was barely visible, integrated with the subtlety that came from custom work rather than off-the-shelf luxury. She paused at the entrance, slightly flustered. I'm so sorry I'm late. My flight from Copenhagen was delayed, and then the autonomous car system had me routed through 3 security checkpoints. Her eyes scanned the room, searching, until they landed on Marcus. There you are. She crossed the ballroom directly toward him, ignoring Richard's attempt to intercept her. Sidestepping a server without breaking stride. Marcus stood without thinking, his whole body language changing. The quiet resignation that had settled over him during dinner vanished, replaced by something warmer, more alive. You made it, he said, and his voice carried an intimacy that made several nearby conversations pause. Did you honestly think I'd miss this? Sophia reached him, touched his arm, her hand lingering a moment longer than strictly professional, and leaned in to kiss his cheek. The gesture was familiar, comfortable, loaded with history. I've been begging to meet Emma for years. You've kept your daughter hidden like she's classified military secrets. She turned to Emma, who was staring open-mouthed, and smiled with genuine warmth. You must be Emma. Fair warning about your father, He's pathologically incapable of talking about anything without somehow working your accomplishments into the conversation. We could be discussing load-bearing calculations and he'll find a way to mention your MBA thesis. It's adorable and completely insufferable, Emma laughed despite herself, shock giving way to confused delight. Jake was staring at Sophia with obvious admiration and confusion about who exactly she was. The table had gone silent. Diane's glass hovered halfway to her lips, forgotten. Richard was standing, his augmented features cycling through micro-expressions as he tried to process this disruption to his carefully orchestrated evening. "Welcome," Richard said, forcing charm into his voice. "I'm Richard Lancaster, Emma's uncle. I apologize for the confusion, but I don't believe we've had the pleasure." "Are you a friend of the Sullivans?" Sophia barely glanced at him. "No. I'm here with Marcus." "With Marcus?" Richard's confusion was genuine. Nothing in his carefully maintained database of social connections had prepared him for this. Sophia moved to the empty chair beside Marcus, not the power seat Richard had been gesturing toward, but the one that put her directly next to Marcus, their shoulders nearly touching. "Yes." "Is that strange?" Diane recovered first, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How lovely. And how do you two know each other? Are you from his neighborhood?" The question was designed to demean, to suggest Sophia was from Marcus's world of poverty and struggle. Sophia settled into her chair with the ease of someone comfortable anywhere, her hand resting casually on the back of Marcus's chair. "We work together," Richard laughed, not genuine amusement, but the condescending chuckle of someone who thought he understood. "Work together? Does Marcus fix your kitchen cabinets?" The joke landed with scattered, uncomfortable laughter from those who'd been listening. Sophia didn't laugh. She looked at Richard with sudden, crystalline clarity, understanding exactly what kind of man he was. What kind of evening this had been for Marcus, and her expression went cold. "No," she said, her voice dropping several degrees. "I'm his partner." The ballroom had gone perfectly still, the kind of silence that felt like pressure against Marcus's eardrums. Every neural display in the room had probably just pulled up search results for Chen Associates, guests frantically trying to understand what they'd just witnessed. The ambient music continued its algorithmic loop, oblivious to the social earthquake that had just occurred. Tyler Sullivan broke the silence first, his voice carrying genuine shock rather than his earlier smugness. "Wait. Chen Associates. CA." He looked at Marcus like seeing him for the first time. "The firm that did the Portland microhousing project." Sophia's expression warmed fractionally, the first person in this room besides Emma to show anything resembling authentic interest. "Among others, yes, dude." Tyler turned to Jake, his neural display clearly feeding him information, his eyes moving in that telltale pattern of someone reading while pretending to maintain eye contact. "My entire master's thesis was on their work. They revolutionized density housing architecture. CA made sustainable affordable housing actually viable and profitable. The Portland project houses 15,000 families in what used to be 6 city blocks of abandoned warehouses." Jake was staring at Marcus with an expression somewhere between shock and dawning respect. "You're that Marcus Chen?" The Marcus Chen. Marcus felt his throat tighten. This was exactly what he'd spent 2 decades avoiding, the exposure, the sudden shift in perception based on credentials rather than character. "It's collaborative work," he said, his voice quieter than he intended. "Sophia does most of the. Marcus is pathologically incapable of taking credit for anything." Sophia cut him off with the kind of affectionate exasperation that spoke to years of having this exact argument. "He's the visionary. The philosophy, the designs, the innovations, that's all him. I manage projects and partnerships, handle the business side, but the work itself?" She looked at him with something fierce in her eyes. "That's pure Marcus." "The Norway Vertical Village project," Tyler continued, still reading from his neural feed. "That won the Pritzker Architecture Prize 3 years ago." "Holy shit, that's like the Nobel Prize of Architecture." Emma's voice came out broken, barely more than a whisper. "Dad," Marcus couldn't look at her. If he saw tears in her eyes, saw the confusion and hurt of 28 years of carefully maintained deception, he'd cracked completely. Diane recovered first, her social survival instincts kicking in with the speed of someone who'd spent a lifetime managing optics. "Marcus, why on earth wouldn't you tell us? We had no idea you were so accomplished. This is wonderful news. We should celebrate." "He doesn't need to tell people." Sophia's voice had gone cold again, her eyes still fixed on Marcus even as she addressed Diane. "His work speaks for itself. Which is more than most people can claim." The cut was surgical, precise. Diane physically recoiled, her cosmetically enhanced face struggling to process the insult through layers of paralyzed muscle. Richard was already pivoting, his politician's brain adapting to the new reality with desperate speed. "Marcus, my God. This is incredible. We should have known. Helen always said you were brilliant, but we thought she was just being, well, a wife. You know how it is." He forced a laugh that landed like lead. Marcus met his eyes across the table. "No, Richard. I don't know how it is." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Richard's smile remained fixed, but something behind his augmented eyes went hard. Dominic Sullivan stood, his movement drawing every eye in the room. He extended his hand to Marcus, the gesture carrying the weight of his considerable social capital. "Mr. Chen, I owe you an apology. We didn't understand the scope of your work. Your contributions to sustainable urban housing are extraordinary." Patricia stood beside her husband, her earlier wariness replaced by calculation of a different sort. "The Sullivan Foundation has been looking at sustainable housing initiatives for our philanthropic portfolio. We'd love to discuss potential partnerships." Marcus is booked until 2027. Sophia's interruption was polite but absolute. "But I'm happy to have our office send information about our current projects and partnership criteria." The implication was clear. These people would now have to go through proper channels, submit proposals, compete for attention like everyone else. No special family access, no shortcuts through personal connection. Marcus felt the walls closing in. People were standing now, moving toward him, their neural displays probably composing messages, pulling up contact information, calculating networking opportunities. This was his nightmare, not vindication, but commodity. Being valued for utility rather than character, desired for access rather than substance. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Excuse me." He didn't wait for response, just moved toward the nearest exit, muscle memory from earlier reconnaissance guiding him toward the gardens. The night air hit him like cold water, sharp and clarifying. The estate's grounds stretched before him, every plant and pathway perfectly designed, maintained by autonomous systems that cost more than most people's annual income. Holographic sculptures dotted the landscape, shifting through programmed sequences, beauty commodified and controlled. Marcus walked until the ballroom's light faded. Until he found a bench beneath something that might have been a real tree, difficult to tell in this environment where nature and technology blended seamlessly. He sat heavily, feeling every year of his 52 years, every hour spent building, designing, fighting against exactly the kind of excess that surrounded him now. "You're not allowed to run away." Sophia's voice came from behind him. "Not after I flew 4,000 miles and publicly humiliated your in-laws. That buys me at least a conversation." Marcus didn't turn. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." She moved around the bench, sat beside him without asking permission, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that probably cost less than Diane's dress but suited her infinitely better. "Marcus, they were humiliating you. In front of your daughter. At her wedding. You think I could sit there and watch that? I've dealt with it for 20 years, I know." Her voice softened. "And I've watched you deal with it for the 12 years I've known you. Quietly. Nobly. Never defending yourself, never demanding recognition. Never asking for anything." She paused, and Marcus heard something in her silence that made him finally look at her. "It's one of the things I love about you." The word hung between them like something physical, something that changed the molecular composition of the air. Marcus's neural implant registered his elevated heart rate, offered to adjust his body chemistry to calm him. He dismissed the notification. "Sophia, I know." She cut him off gently. Bad timing. Your daughter's wedding weekend. But I flew from Copenhagen, Marcus. I rearranged 3 project deadlines and left my team scrambling. And I didn't do it just for the ceremony. I did it because you finally invited me into your real life. Do you know how long I've waited for that? Marcus found his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. I didn't think you'd want. I'm not exactly a catch. Single father, arthritis, living in a 120 square foot apartment by choice. Most people think that makes me crazy, most people are idiots. Sophia's hand found his, her fingers warm despite the cool night air. Stop diminishing yourself. You're one of the most brilliant, principled, genuine people I've ever met. You raised an extraordinary daughter alone. You've changed thousands of lives with your work. And you've been my closest friend, my creative partner, the person I most want to talk to at the end of every day for over a decade. Why didn't you say anything? The question came out before Marcus could stop it. All these years, if you felt, because you weren't ready. Sophia squeezed his hand. You were focused on Emma, on keeping your head down, on avoiding exactly what happened in there. You had your reasons, and I respected them. But Emma's grown now. She's getting married, starting her own life. And I'm tired, Marcus. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this. Tired of professional boundaries and careful distance and finding reasons not to act on what's been obvious to everyone else for years. Before Marcus could respond, footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Emma appeared, backlit by the distant ballroom, her thermoreactive dress shifting colors with her emotional state, currently a turbulent mix of blues and grays that suggested confusion and hurt. Dad? Can we talk? Sophia stood immediately, squeezed Marcus's shoulder in a gesture that carried both support and promise, and slipped back toward the house. I'll give you two some privacy. Marcus watched her go, then turned to his daughter. Emma stood a few feet away, her arms wrapped around herself despite the dress's climate control features. Her neural display was dark, she'd turned off her feeds, given him her full attention in a way most people in her generation rarely did. Sit down, sweetheart. She sat beside him on the bench, not touching, the space between them feeling vast. Why didn't you tell me? About any of it? What was I supposed to say? Marcus kept his voice gentle. Knowing they were walking through emotional minefield. That I was secretly successful but wanted you to think we were struggling? Yes. Emma's voice cracked. Dad, I thought, my entire life, I thought we were barely scraping by. I worked 3 jobs in college. I lived on instant ramen and took extra shifts at the campus library because I thought you couldn't afford to help me. You had everything you needed. I thought I was a burden. The words exploded out of her. Do you understand that? I thought every dollar you spent on me was a sacrifice. I felt guilty asking for money for textbooks, for interview clothes, for anything. And all this time you were, what? Testing me? Marcus felt something crack in his chest. Emma, sit down. Please. She was already sitting, but something in his tone made her shift closer, her anger momentarily giving way to the muscle memory of childhood. When Dad used that voice, something important was coming. When your mother died, Marcus began, forcing himself to hold her gaze. Her family descended like vultures. They wanted to take you, raise you in their world. Richard actually consulted lawyers about custody. Did you know that? Said I couldn't provide the life you deserved, that Helen would have wanted you raised with proper advantages. Emma's eyes widened. I didn't know, I didn't tell you. You were 8 years old and drowning in grief. You didn't need to know that people were trying to take you away from the only parent you had left. Marcus took a breath, organized his thoughts the way he organized structural plans. Richard was right about some things. I couldn't give you a mansion or private schools or the kind of connections that come from country club memberships. But I could give you something more important. What? The ability to know your own worth. Not because of money or status, but because of who you are. Marcus finally let himself reach for her hand. If you'd known I was successful, that I was funding your scholarships through shell accounts, paying for things secretly, you would have always wondered if you earned it yourself. Every accomplishment would have come with an asterisk in your mind. But this way, everything you achieved? That's yours. Your grades, your work ethic, your MBA, your career, that's all Emma. I didn't want to rob you of that. Tears were streaming down Emma's face now, catching the light from her dress's bioluminescent elements. But I thought you were suffering. I thought I was making your life harder, never. Marcus pulled her into a hug, feeling her shake against him. You've been my purpose, Emma. My joy. Raising you has been the greatest success of my life. Not the Pritzker Prize. Not the housing projects. Not any of it. You. They sat like that for a long moment, Emma crying into his shoulder the way she hadn't since she was a child. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy, her makeup running, her neural implant probably offering to send emergency beauty protocols, which she was clearly ignoring. Uncle Richard and Aunt Diane have been giving me money, she said quietly. 4 years. College textbooks, interview clothes, my first apartment deposit. They said you couldn't help, that they wanted to make sure I had opportunities. I've been grateful to them. I felt guilty about accepting it, but I thought, how much? Marcus's voice had gone flat. I don't know exactly. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands over the years. Why? Because I gave you money for all of those things. Marcus felt cold fury settling into his bones. Every time you needed textbooks, I sent money. When you mentioned interview clothes, I transferred funds. Your apartment deposit, I sent that 3 days before you signed the lease. Emma's face went through a rapid succession of expressions: confusion, realization, horror, rage. They were taking your money and giving it to me like it was theirs, probably intercepting the transfers and rerouting them through their own accounts. Made them look like the generous ones while I looked like I couldn't support my own daughter. Marcus heard his voice going hard, forced himself to soften it. It gave them power over both of us. You felt indebted to them. I looked like a failure. They got to play heroes while actually doing nothing. Emma stood abruptly, her hands clenched into fists. I'm going to kill them. No, you're not. Marcus caught her wrist, pulled her back down. You're going to get married tomorrow, have a beautiful wedding, and let this go. How can you be so calm? Because I won, Em. Marcus made her look at him. Look at you. You're kind, grounded, ethical. You have work ethic and humility and genuine values. You're marrying someone who loves you for who you are, not what family you come from or how much money you have. That's what I wanted for you. Their manipulation didn't change that. If anything, it proved everything I believed about them. Emma sagged against him, the fight draining out in favor of exhaustion. I love you, Dad. I wish you'd trusted me with the truth, but I understand why you didn't. And I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything, they sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Emma pulled back, a mischievous smile breaking through her tears. So. Sophia, Marcus groaned. Don't, Dad. That woman is crazy about you. And you're clearly crazy about her. I saw how you looked at each other. I saw how you completely transformed when she walked in. It's complicated, it's not. Emma poked him in the chest, the gesture so familiar from her childhood that Marcus felt his throat tighten again. You're both single, brilliant, and clearly perfect for each other. What's complicated? I didn't want to introduce someone new into your life. You're my priority. I'm 28 years old and getting married tomorrow. I'm not a child who needs protecting from the idea of you dating. Dad, you deserve to be happy. Actually happy, not just quietly content. And that woman? She looks at you like you hung the moon and personally engineered its orbit. When did you get so wise? I had a really good teacher. Emma kissed his cheek and stood. Also, she's gorgeous and clearly brilliant, and if you don't at least try, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. Consider it a wedding gift to me, be happy. She walked back toward the ballroom, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the weight of permission he hadn't realized he'd been waiting for. Inside, Sophia had been cornered by Richard and Diane near one of the holographic art installations. Marcus could see them through the windows, could read the body language even from a distance, Richard trying charm, Diane attempting damage control, Sophia standing with her arms crossed and an expression of barely contained contempt. Marcus moved closer, not entering but positioning himself where he could hear through the open terrace doors. No idea about Marcus's work, Richard was saying, his voice carrying that false heartiness he used when trying to sell something. If we'd known, of course we would have treated him differently. We're family, after all, that's exactly the problem. Mr. Lancaster. Sophia's voice could have etched glass. You treated him a certain way because you thought he had no value. His value hasn't changed. Only your knowledge of it. Which tells me everything I need to know about your character. That's not fair, Diane interjected, her voice shrill. We were trying to help. We've given Emma thousands, you were taking money Marcus sent his daughter and redistributing it as if it were yours. Sophia's words landed like physical blows. I helped Marcus set up Emma's education accounts. I know exactly how much he transferred and when. And I heard Emma mention your help. Shall we pull up the transaction records right now? Compare them publicly? Or would you prefer to maintain what's left of your dignity? Diane had gone white beneath her cosmetic enhancements. Richard's hand clamped on her arm, a warning. There's no need for hostility, Richard tried, his charm cracking at the edges. We're family. Marcus understands that we meant well, Marcus forgives because that's who he is. Sophia took a step closer to Richard, and despite being several inches shorter, she somehow made him back up. He spent 20 years enduring your condescension for Emma's sake. Quietly accepting your judgment because he didn't want to create conflict. But I'm not Marcus, Mr. Lancaster. And I'm not family. So let me be absolutely clear, if you ever diminish him again, in any way, I will make it my personal mission to ensure everyone in your social and professional circles knows exactly what kind of people you are. Are you threatening me? Richard's voice had gone dangerous, his neural implant flaring brighter, probably recording this conversation, gathering evidence. Sophia smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut. I'm promising you. Marcus might be too principled to leverage his reputation, but I'm not. One interview with Architecture Today about how his own family treated him while he was revolutionizing affordable housing? One mention in the right social feeds about your creative financial arrangements? Your reputation wouldn't survive it. Richard. And in your world, reputation is the only currency that matters. Patricia Sullivan, who'd been watching this exchange from a nearby conversation cluster, laughed outright. I like her. She crossed to stand beside Sophia, her presence adding the weight of the Sullivan name to the confrontation. You should probably listen to her, Richard. My family's foundation does extensive background checks on potential partners. We'd be very interested in any irregularities. Richard and Diane retreated, their augmented features struggling to maintain composure. Marcus watched them go, felt something uncoil in his chest, not satisfaction exactly, but relief. Sophia had fought battles he'd refused to fight. Defended ground he'd willingly ceded. It should have bothered him, this intervention, but instead it felt like being seen. Actually seen, and valued, and protected by someone who understood both his principles and his limits. Hours passed. The party finally wound down, guests retreating to their assigned suites throughout the estate. Marcus remained on the terrace, watching stars that were probably half real and half holographic, difficult to tell with Richard's atmospheric generators. Sophia found him again, carrying 2 glasses of wine. Thought you might need this. Marcus accepted the glass, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Thank you. For everything tonight, stop thanking me. Sophia leaned against the railing beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. I didn't do it for gratitude. Why did you do it? Because watching people underestimate you is my least favorite thing in the world. And I've been watching it for 12 years. She took a sip of wine, her eyes on the artificial horizon. Do you know how rare it is? Someone who genuinely doesn't need external validation? Who knows their worth and lives by their values regardless of recognition or reward. Is that what attracted you? Marcus found himself asking, the wine and darkness making him brave. My stubborn pride, Sophia laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Among other things. Your hands attracted me first, actually, my hands, the first time we met. That investor meeting in Seattle. Everyone else was in expensive suits with soft hands and mural displays showing 12 concurrent feeds. You had sawdust under your nails. You'd been building something that morning before flying out, Marcus remembered. A prototype staircase system for the Portland project. You couldn't stop sketching during my presentation. I thought you were being incredibly rude, so I called you out. Asked if you had notes to share. Sophia turned to face him, her eyes reflecting starlight. And you showed me 3 structural improvements I'd completely missed. Drew them right there on your tablet. Explained the load distribution issues in my design. I was furious, I remember. You told me my ego was showing, and you said ego had nothing to do with it, the design either worked or it didn't, and being polite about structural failure helped no one. Sophia smiled at the memory. I was attracted to you immediately. Not despite the criticism, but because of it. You weren't trying to impress me or network or play any games. You just saw problems and wanted to solve them. That sketch you made, I kept it. Marcus set down his wine glass. You kept it? It's framed in my office. Has been for 12 years. My assistant thinks it's a famous architect's original work. She paused. She's not wrong, the air between them had changed, charged with something Marcus had been deliberately ignoring for years. Sophia, I don't know how to do this. Dating, romance, whatever this is. I was with Helen for 20 years, since I was 22. After she died, I just shut that part of myself down. Focused on Emma, and now Emma's getting married. Starting her own life, and I don't know who I am outside of being her father. Sophia's hand found his on the railing. Yes, you do. You're Marcus Chen. You're brilliant and stubborn and kind. You're occasionally infuriating when you refuse to take credit for anything. You're the person who makes me want to be better at everything I do. And you're someone I've been in love with for longer than I care to admit. Marcus's breath caught. We work together. If this goes wrong, then we'll deal with it like adults. Sophia moved closer, her free hand coming up to his chest. Marcus, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm just asking you to stop hiding. From recognition, from your family, from me. Just be yourself and let people see it. I'm scared. Good. Sophia's smile was gentle. So am I. That means it matters. They stood in silence, hands intertwined, the estate's artificial perfection surrounding them. Then Sophia's expression shifted, playful. You promised me a dance tomorrow. At the wedding. Did I? Don't even try to back out. I flew from Copenhagen specifically for that dance. That's legally binding in at least 6 countries, Marcus laughed despite himself. Is that so? Absolutely. Plus I want to make Diane jealous. She's been glaring at me like I personally devalued her social currency. You kind of did. Good. Sophia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. Also, for the record? You look really good in that suit. I've been wanting to tell you that all night. The flirtation was obvious now, intentional. Marcus felt something unlock in his chest, years of careful restraint finally breaking. Yeah. Though I'm intensely curious what you look like out of it. The words hung between them, invitation and challenge. Marcus turned to face her fully, his hand coming up to cup her face. Sophia, too much? Sorry. I've been holding that back for approximately 11 years. It just slipped out. Marcus kissed her before he could talk himself out of it. The kiss was tentative at first, testing boundaries, then deepened into something urgent. Years of professional restraint, mutual respect, and buried desire surged to the surface. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Oh, Sophia said, her voice unsteady. Okay. So we're doing this, apparently. Good. Great. Because I've been imagining that for a very long time, and it was even better than. He kissed her again, more confident now, backing her against the railing. Her hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer. It was passionate, intense, a revelation of everything they'd been carefully not acknowledging. Marcus pulled back, resting his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. We should stop. Why? Because if we don't, I'm going to suggest we find somewhere more private, and I'm not sure that's appropriate given where we are. Sophia's smile was wicked. Who says it's not appropriate? You're a grown man. I'm a grown woman. We've been dancing around this for over a decade. Emma literally gave you permission an hour ago. I don't need my daughter's permission to sleep with someone. So you're thinking about sleeping with me? Marcus heard himself laugh, surprised by the sound. I'd been thinking about it for approximately 11 years and 7 months, oddly specific. You wore that green dress to the Oslo conference. I nearly forgot my entire presentation. Sophia's eyes lit up. The green dress? I wore that specifically to see if you'd notice. I noticed. I've been noticing. Then what are we? There you are. Richard's voice cut through the moment like a blade. The man of the hour. Or should I say, the man who's been lying for 20 years. Marcus turned, instinctively placing himself between Richard and Sophia. Richard was clearly drunk. His gait unsteady, his neural display cycling through colors that suggested emotional dysregulation. His augmented features were distorting slightly, either the alcohol interfering with the technology or his anger disrupting the careful calibration. Richard, go to bed. You're drunk, I'm honest. Finally. Richard's laugh was bitter. Something you've never been. All this time, you let us think you were nothing. Why? Some sick power play? Watching us try to help you, pity you, while you were secretly successful? Does that make you feel superior? That's enough, Sophia said, her voice sharp. Richard ignored her, his attention fixed on Marcus. You made us look like fools. In front of everyone. The Sullivans, our friends, our business partners. They're all talking about how we didn't know our own brother-in-law was some famous architect. Do you know what that does to our reputation? I never claimed to be anything, Marcus said evenly. You assumed, because you lived in a slum. Drove a 20-year-old truck. Dressed like a laborer, like someone who doesn't define their worth by material possessions, you think you're better than us. Than me. Richard moved closer, swaying slightly. That's what this is really about. Helen always thought you were so noble, so pure. But you're just arrogant. Too proud to accept help, too self-righteous to live like a normal person. Marcus felt his careful control finally crack. A normal person, Richard? You spend more on lawn maintenance than most families earn in a year. Your car costs more than affordable housing units I've designed. You're drowning in excess while people sleep on streets. And you think I'm abnormal? I worked for this, so did I. Marcus's voice rose, years of restrained anger finally breaking free. The difference is my work actually helps people. It gives them homes, dignity, hope. What does yours do? Make you richer? Impress people at parties? You self-righteous, stop. Sophia's voice cut through the confrontation with surgical precision. She stepped between Marcus and Richard, her posture relaxed but her eyes hard. Richard, you're drunk and embarrassing yourself. Marcus, he's not worth it. Let's go, Richard laughed, the sound ugly and raw. Of course. Run away with your little architect. Does she know you're broken, Marcus? That you've been hiding in your poverty apartment for 20 years because you're terrified of being anything more than Helen's charity project? Marcus felt the words hit like physical blows, each one landing on old wounds he'd thought long healed. But before he could respond, Sophia turned to Richard with an expression that made the older man actually step back. One more word, she said quietly, and I make a phone call. Just one. To a journalist friend at Global Architecture Review. About how the Lancaster family treated one of the most influential architects of our generation while he was quietly revolutionizing affordable housing. About the financial manipulation, the theft of funds meant for his daughter. About everything. She smiled, and it was terrifying. Your reputation wouldn't survive the weekend. So walk away. Richard. While you still can, Richard stared at her, his augmented features cycling through calculations, probably weighing his options, running social simulations through his neural implant. Finally, he turned and stumbled back toward the house, his expensive suit rumpled, his dignity in tatters. Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling the adrenaline drain away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Sophia turned to him, her hand finding his chest, feeling his elevated heartbeat. "And for the record? You're not broken. You're not hiding. You made deliberate choices based on your values, and there's nothing pathetic about that, Sophia, no. Listen to me." Her hand moved to his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Richard is everything you're not: materialistic, shallow, cruel. He builds monuments to his own ego while you build homes for people who need them. You're not the failure here, Marcus. You never were." Marcus pulled her close, buried his face in her hair, breathed in the reality of her. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Lucky for you, I have terrible taste in men. Now take me somewhere private before I do something highly inappropriate on your former brother-in-law's terrace." They found Marcus's guest suite, small by the estate's standards, but still absurdly luxurious. Real wood furniture, a bed large enough for 4 people, windows that shifted from transparent to opaque with a thought. Marcus barely noticed. All he could focus on was Sophia, the reality of her presence, the weight of years of wanting finally given permission to exist. She kissed him as soon as the door closed, pressing him against the wall with surprising strength. "I should warn you," she said between kisses, "I've been thinking about this for a very long time. I have expectations." Marcus laughed against her mouth. "Expectations? You're brilliant and talented, and I've watched you build things with your hands for 12 years. I have very specific fantasies about those hands." "Sophia, too much talking." She pulled him toward the bed, her fingers working the buttons of his shirt. "We can have deep, meaningful conversations later. Right now I need you to stop being noble and principled and just want me." "I do want you." Marcus caught her hands, held them still, made her look at him. "I've wanted you for years. But I need you to know this isn't just physical for me. This isn't just tonight." Something in Sophia's expression softened, vulnerability breaking through the confidence. "Good. Because I didn't fly 4,000 miles for a one-night stand." Marcus chin. "I flew here because I love you. Because I've loved you for years and I'm done pretending otherwise." The next hours blurred together, skin and warmth and the revelation of finally being allowed to want without guilt. Marcus discovered that Sophia was right about his hands, that she gasped when he touched her spine, that she laughed during sex and swore in 3 languages and was absolutely, devastatingly perfect. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the estate's climate control keeping the room at precisely optimal temperature, something Marcus would normally find wasteful but currently appreciated. Sophia traced patterns on his chest, her neural display dark, giving him her complete attention. "So," she said eventually. "Tomorrow, Emma's wedding." Marcus felt reality creeping back in, bringing responsibility and expectation with it. "Are you ready for it?" The performance, the questions, Richard and Diane pretending tonight didn't happen. "I don't have much choice." Marcus caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "But having you there helps." "I'm not going anywhere." Sophia propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with an expression that made his chest tight. "After this weekend, we need to talk. About us, about what this means, about whether you're ready to actually be in a relationship instead of just quietly existing." "I'm ready." Marcus surprised himself with how much he meant it. "I've been ready for a while. I just didn't know how to start." "Well, I'd say we've made a pretty good start." Sophia grinned, wicked and warm. "Though we should probably practice. You know, to make sure we get it right." Marcus pulled her down for a kiss, and they didn't talk for a long time after that. Morning arrived with artificial sunlight filtering through the smart windows, gradually brightening in simulation of natural dawn. Marcus woke to find Sophia already awake, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning." Marcus felt suddenly awkward, uncertain of the protocol. They'd been colleagues and friends for 12 years. One night didn't erase that history, but it fundamentally changed the dynamic. Sophia seemed to sense his thoughts. Don't panic. We're fine. Better than fine. And you're not allowed to start catastrophizing about how this complicates the business relationship. We'll figure it out. How do you always know what I'm thinking? 12 years of watching you, Marcus. I know your tells. She kissed him quickly, then pulled away with obvious reluctance. But I should get back to my own room. We have a wedding to attend, and I need to make myself presentable enough that Diane doesn't have the satisfaction of criticizing my appearance. After she left, Marcus showered in the guest suite's ridiculously appointed bathroom, temperature-controlled water, sonic cleaning options, aromatherapy settings, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. His life had been carefully controlled for 20 years, every decision filtered through the lens of what was best for Emma. Now Emma was getting married, and Marcus was faced with the terrifying prospect of actually living for himself. His neural implant chimed, a message from Emma. Dad, can you meet me in the East Garden at 9? Before everything gets crazy, Marcus dressed in his suit, the same one from yesterday, his only one, and found his way to the garden. Emma sat on a bench beneath a real oak tree, one of the few organic elements in Richard's otherwise manufactured paradise. She wore a simple dress, her hair down, looking younger than her 28 years. Hey, Dad, hey, sweetheart. Marcus sat beside her, their shoulders touching. Nervous, terrified. Excited. Wondering if I'm making a huge mistake. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Normal wedding day feelings, right? Marcus studied her face, saw the doubt lurking beneath the smile. Emma, what's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She picked at a thread on her dress. Jake's family has been messaging me all morning. Asking about you, about your work, about potential business connections. His mother wants to introduce you to their foundation board. His father wants to discuss real estate development partnerships. And I just keep thinking that they didn't care about you yesterday when they thought I was nobody. Emma nodded, tears threatening. I know Jake loves me. I do. But his family, they're looking at me differently now. Like I have value because you have value. And I hate it, Dad. I hate that it matters to them. Marcus pulled her close, felt her shake against him. Emma, listen to me. If Jake allows his family's opinion to influence how he treats you, he's not the right man. If he defends you, loves you, chooses you regardless of social pressure, then maybe he's worthy of you. But that's something you need to know before you walk down that aisle. How do I know? You ask him. Directly. And you trust your instincts about his answer. Emma was quiet for a long moment, then pulled back and wiped her eyes. Sophia stayed in your room last night. Marcus felt heat rise in his face. Emma, don't apologize. I'm happy for you. Really. She's amazing, and you deserve to be happy. Emma smiled, more genuine this time. Also, the security system logged her entry and exit. Aunt Diane knows. She's been rage messaging people all morning, of course she has. Marcus couldn't help but laugh. Dad, can I ask you something? About Mom. The shift in topic was sudden but not unexpected. Always, would she be happy? About me marrying Jake, about you and Sophia, about all of this. Marcus thought about Helen, fierce, principled, absolutely certain in her convictions. Your mother would be proud of the woman you'd become. She'd probably have some choice words for Richard and Diane. And she'd like Sophia. How do you know? Because Sophia's like her. Strong, brilliant, doesn't suffer fools. Your mother would have appreciated that. Marcus paused, felt old grief mixing with new hope. And she'd tell me to stop hiding, to let myself be happy, to stop using her memory as an excuse to avoid living. She sounds smart, she was. Marcus kissed Emma's forehead. Now go find Jake. Have that conversation. And whatever you decide, I support you. The wedding was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon, which gave Marcus several hours to navigate increasingly uncomfortable social situations. The estate filled with guests, hundreds of them, all displaying their status through clothing, augmentation, and carefully curated mural feeds. Marcus spotted Tyler Sullivan arguing with Richard near the ceremony space, their voices carrying across the manicured lawn. "Can't believe you didn't know," Tyler was saying, his youthful face flushed with genuine anger. "The man revolutionized my entire field of study, and you introduced him as a handyman. Do you have any idea how that makes our family look, your family?" Richard's voice was sharp despite his obvious hangover. "Last I checked, you're marrying into our family. Yeah, well, we're reconsidering that." Tyler's words fell like bombs. "My parents spent the morning reviewing the prenup. Turns out there are clauses that become relevant if there's evidence of financial misconduct or character issues." Funny how that works. Marcus moved away before he could hear Richard's response, not wanting to take satisfaction in the man's downfall but unable to completely suppress it either. Sophia found him near one of the holographic fountains, looking elegant in a dress that shifted colors subtly with the light. "You're brooding." "Stop brooding, I'm not brooding. I'm processing. You're catastrophizing about whether your choices over the last 20 years were right, and whether Emma's marriage is going to implode because of class differences, and whether last night was a mistake." Sophia handed him a glass of water. "Stop it. You made the best decisions you could with the information you had. Emma is strong enough to handle her own relationship. And last night was definitely not a mistake. How do you do that? Do what? Know exactly what I'm thinking. Practice. Also, you're extremely predictable when you're anxious." She leaned against him briefly, a gesture that looked casual but felt intimate. "The ceremony starts in an hour. Emma's with Jake now. Apparently having a very serious conversation about values and family expectations. You have spies, I have excellent hearing," and was walking past their dressing rooms. Sophia's smile was unapologetic. "Emma's holding her ground. I'm impressed." The ceremony itself was beautiful in the way only unlimited money could achieve, holographic decorations that shifted and flowed, live music from an orchestra that probably cost more than most people's annual salary, flowers that were definitely real and probably flown in from somewhere exotic. But Marcus barely noticed the excess. His attention was fixed on Emma, walking down the aisle in a dress that managed to be both simple and stunning, her expression determined rather than traditional wedding day dreamy. Jake stood at the altar looking nervous, which Marcus appreciated. The boy, man, Marcus corrected himself, should be nervous. He was promising to love and honor someone extraordinary, and that deserved gravity. The officiant, some celebrity minister whose mural display identified him as having married 3 royal families and a tech billionaire, began the ceremony with typical platitudes about love and commitment. Marcus tuned it out, watching Emma instead, trying to read her body language. When they reached the vows, Jake spoke first. His voice was steady, clear, and he looked directly at Emma rather than performing for the crowd. "Emma, I promise to love you for who you are, not who my family thinks you should be. I promise to defend you, support you, and never make you feel like you have to prove your worth to anyone, including me. I promise to be your partner, not your social climber. And I promise that our life together will be built on what matters, not what impresses people." The words were clearly directed at his own family, a public declaration of priorities. Dominic and Patricia Sullivan shifted in their seats, looking uncomfortable but not angry. Tyler grinned outright. Emma's vows were simpler. "Jake, I promise to be honest with you, even when it's hard. I promise to call you on your nonsense, celebrate your victories, and stand beside you when things get difficult. I promise to never let our love become about anything other than us. And I promise to always remember what my dad taught me, that real worth comes from character, not credentials." She looked at Marcus as she spoke that last line, her eyes bright with tears. Marcus felt his own throat tighten, felt Sophia's hand find his and squeeze. The ceremony concluded with the traditional kiss, and the crowd erupted in applause. Marcus found himself standing, clapping harder than he'd intended. Feeling relief and pride and a strange sense of completion, the reception was more of the same excess, endless food, elaborate entertainment, social performance masquerading as celebration. Marcus endured congratulations from people who'd ignored him yesterday, business propositions from developers he'd spent his career opposing, and repeated questions about potential partnerships. Sophia stayed close, running interference when needed, diverting conversations when they got too predatory. "You know," she said during a rare quiet moment, "you could leverage this. All these people suddenly want access to you. We can negotiate better terms for our projects, demand more sustainable practices. Force them to actually care about affordable housing. Is that what you want? To use my suddenly enhanced social capital for business advantage? No. But I want you to stop acting like success is shameful." Sophia held his gaze. "You've spent 20 years hiding your accomplishments because you were afraid they'd corrupt you or Emma. But they haven't. You're still the same person you were yesterday, principled, dedicated, occasionally infuriatingly humble. The only thing that's changed is other people's awareness. Everything's changed, nothing important has changed." Sophia touched his face, the gesture intimate despite their public surroundings. "You're still you. Emma still loves you. I still love you. The buildings you design still house thousands of families. Your work still matters more than Richard's ego or Diane's social climbing. Don't let their sudden attention make you question everything you've built." Before Marcus could respond, Emma appeared, having changed from her wedding dress into something simpler for the reception. "Dad, dance with me? Before this turns into a complete circus?" Marcus let Emma lead him to the dance floor, where other couples were already swaying to music that probably cost more per minute than most people's hourly wage. He held his daughter carefully, aware of how rare these moments would become now that she was starting her own life. "You did good, Dad," Emma said quietly. "I didn't do anything. You found someone, made a choice, stood up for yourself. I meant with everything. Raising me, teaching me values, making sure I knew my worth. Jake's family was pushing hard for us to sign a modified prenup after they learned about your work. Wanted to make sure we'd have appropriate resources, suggested we move into one of their properties, talked about the opportunities this marriage creates for business connections." Marcus felt cold. "What did you say?" "I told them no. Jake and I are buying a small apartment in the city with our own money. We're building our life based on what we need, not what impresses people. And if they can't accept that, they don't have to be part of our life." Emma smiled, fierce and proud. "I learned that from you, Emma." "Dad, stop. You did everything right. I'm not damaged or deprived or lacking anything important. I know who I am and what I value, and that's worth more than all of Richard's money or the Sullivan family's connections. So stop questioning yourself. Please." Marcus pulled her closer, feeling tears threaten. "When did you get so wise? I had a really good teacher." She laughed, echoing her earlier words. "Now go dance with Sophia. She's been staring at you like a lovesick teenager for the last 10 minutes, and it's actually adorable." The evening wore on. Marcus danced with Sophia, who moved against him with the same confidence she brought to everything else, whispering inappropriate comments about Diane's increasingly desperate attempts to network with Sullivan Foundation board members. They ate food Marcus couldn't taste, made small talk with people whose names he immediately forgot, and counted down the hours until they could escape. Richard approached as the night was winding down, his expression carefully neutral, all earlier anger buried beneath social necessity. "Marcus. A word?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Sophia, who nodded. She'd be nearby if needed. He followed Richard to a quiet corner of the estate, away from the remaining guests. "I owe you an apology," Richard began, the words clearly costing him. "Last night I was drunk and said things that were inappropriate." "You were honest," Marcus corrected. "Drunk, but honest. Everything you said was what you've been thinking for 20 years. You just finally said it out loud." Richard's jaw tightened. "Regardless, it was wrong. And I've been speaking with the Sullivan family about potential collaborations between our companies and your firm. No, significant investment opportunities that would benefit everyone." "What?" "No." Marcus kept his voice level, polite. "I'm not interested in partnerships with you, Richard. Not business, not family, not social. You've spent 20 years treating me like a charity case, manipulating my daughter, and stealing from both of us. I don't trust you. I don't like you. And I don't need anything you're offering. Richard's carefully maintained composure cracked. You self-righteous, I'm done. Marcus cut him off. Emma's an adult now. She can manage her own relationship with you, though I suspect that's going to be complicated after she learns the full extent of your financial manipulation. But me? We're finished. You're Helen's brother, and for that reason alone I'll be civil at family events. But that's all you get, you're making a mistake. The Sullivan Foundation could fund dozens of your projects. I've been funding my own projects for 15 years without your help or awareness. I'll continue doing so. Marcus turned to walk away, then paused. And Richard? If you ever speak to Emma the way you spoke to me, if you ever make her feel worthless or inadequate or less than, Sophia will destroy you. She's not bound by my principles or my history with Helen. She'll end your reputation without hesitation. Remember that. He walked away, feeling lighter than he had in years. Sophia met him halfway, reading his expression and grinning. You told him off. I set boundaries. Semantics. You told him off. I'm so proud. She kissed him quickly, then pulled back before it could become inappropriate for their public setting. Ready to escape? I have a hotel room in the city. Real hotel, not Richard's estate. Normal luxury instead of excessive luxury, that's a distinction. There's a difference between expensive and wasteful. My hotel room is expensive. Richard's estate is wasteful. Sophia pulled him toward the exit. Come on. Let's leave before Diane tries to corner us about future dinner plans. They found Emma and Jake to say goodbye. Emma hugged Marcus fiercely, whispered I love you against his shoulder, and made him promise to bring Sophia to dinner the following week. Jake shook his hand with genuine respect, thanked him for raising someone extraordinary, and promised to take care of her, then corrected himself to stand beside her, which earned an approving nod from Emma. The drive back to the city felt like emerging from underwater, leaving behind the artificial perfection of the estate for the real, complicated beauty of New Providence. The vertical farms glowed in the darkness, thousands of families living in structures Marcus had designed, their lives intersecting with his work without them ever knowing it. Sophia's hotel room was exactly as promised, expensive but not excessive, comfortable without being wasteful. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city spreading below them. Real stars visible above the atmospheric scrubbers, so, Sophia said, kicking off her shoes and collapsing on the couch. That was a weekend. Marcus joined her, pulled her close, breathed in the reality of her presence. Thank you. For coming, for defending me, for everything. Stop thanking me. I didn't do it for gratitude. She shifted to look at him directly. I did it because I love you. Because I've loved you for years, and I'm done waiting for the right time or the right circumstances. This is messy and complicated, and we work together, and there's probably going to be awkward moments. But I don't care anymore. I love you too. The words came easier than Marcus expected. I'd been scared to admit it, scared it would change things or complicate the work or, scared it would be real, Sophia finished. Scared you'd have to actually live instead of just quietly existing. I know. But Emma's starting her own life now, Marcus. What are you going to do with yours? Marcus thought about the question, about 20 years of careful control and deliberate limitation. About choices made from grief and guilt and the desperate need to prove he deserved Helen's faith. About a daughter who'd learned his values so well she'd just stood up to one of the most powerful families in the city to protect those principles. I'm going to live, he said finally. Actually live. With you, if you'll have me. Building homes and arguing about cantilevers and stealing sketches off each other's tablets. Making mistakes and learning from them and not hiding from recognition when it comes. That sounds good. Sophia kissed him, slow and deep and full of promise. Also, I should warn you, I'm not moving into your 120 square foot apartment. I love you, but I have standards. We're getting a place together. Something modest but not ridiculous, Marcus laughed against her mouth. Negotiating already? Always. You should know that about me by now. She pulled him closer, her hands working the buttons of his shirt. Now stop talking and make love to me properly. We have the rest of our lives to figure out the details. Later, wrapped around each other in expensive sheets, Sophia traced patterns on Marcus's chest. What are you thinking? That Emma was right. I did good, with raising her, with everything. The choices I made, the values I taught her, the life we built. It wasn't what Richard or Helen's family wanted, but it was real. And it mattered, it still matters. Sophia propped herself up to look at him. Your work matters. Your principles matter. You matter, not because of the Pritzker Prize or the awards or the sudden social recognition. Because of who you are. Marcus pulled her down for a kiss, feeling something settle in his chest, not satisfaction exactly, but contentment. For 20 years he'd been living in reaction to loss, defining himself by what he'd lost rather than what he'd built. But now, with Emma starting her own life and Sophia in his arms and the city spreading below them full of homes he'd designed, Marcus finally understood what Helen had been trying to tell him in those last days. Living didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing to move forward anyway. I'm ready, he said quietly. For whatever comes next. With you, Sophia smiled against his shoulder. Good. Because I have about 16 different project proposals that need your input, and I've been holding back because I didn't want to overwhelm you. Now you're going to actually participate in the business side instead of just designing in your workshop and letting me handle everything else. Is that so? Absolutely. No more hiding, remember? That includes hiding from success. She kissed his chest, then his jaw, then his mouth. But we can discuss that tomorrow. Tonight I have other plans. Marcus surrendered to her touch, to the reality of being wanted and valued and chosen. Outside, New Providence glittered in the darkness, thousands of lights, thousands of lives, thousands of connections forming the complex web of human existence. Marcus had spent his career building spaces for those connections, creating structures that facilitated human flourishing. Now, finally, he was allowing himself the same grace he'd given others, the space to grow, to change, to choose happiness without guilt. Emma would be fine. Better than fine. She'd learned his values well enough to stand on her own principles, to build her life based on what mattered rather than what impressed people, and Marcus, for the first time in 20 years, was allowing himself to actually live instead of just quietly existing. It felt like coming home.